Hello, I want to welcome you to our first in a series of webinars. This is Wendy Ragonis. We're going to give it just another minute or two. I think we've got some other folks that are joining, and then we'll get started. We've got Kevin Deramus here with us. We're very excited to have him. He's the Director of Washington County EMS, and can't wait to hear from him. And I tell people often that there is no other place that I would want to be rather than Washington County under the leadership of Kevin Deramus and his team at EMS. They're doing an outstanding job taking care of the health and safety of our community. So many thanks to Kevin and his team. We also want to thank Mormon and Tate for sponsoring our webinar today. So they have generously offered to do that. So many thanks to them. And we're going to give it just one more minute. Yes, sir. We'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much again for being willing to present with us today and being here. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for the invitation. And if there's a technology glitch, bear with me. I've got a guy right around the corner that can help figure this out for me on my end. So I'll get started. I'm Kevin Deramus, the Director of EMS. Thanks, Wendy, for the introduction. You're too kind. There's kind of a dual hat with the EMS, the way the county is structured, so I just need to briefly explain this before we go too far into it. About 7 years ago, we had an emergency management coordinator that unexpectedly passed away. During that time frame, I was injected as an interim emergency management coordinator, so I was kind of wearing two hats. And then we since opened that position up, and then we took applications, and we moved what was my operations captain into that role. And I still remain as the director over that office, so I'm kind of dual hatting still, but the yeoman's work is done by Brian Rimke on the emergency management side. He's the EMC. The title is Director of Office of Emergency Management and EMS, so a little dual hats there, and that's why I get probably too involved at times with different things. So I just needed to clarify why EMS in our county is tied so intimately to disaster management. That helps clarify the picture a little bit. And then, as you guys know, when COVID started, and I'm going to back up to mid-March, when we started seeing some activity in the United States, and we knew that this was going to become a significant concern, and we really didn't know how big of a problem. We were starting to take some information from media and from other sources and really trying to just sort through it daily, which was causing us problems. And then on a Friday afternoon, the judge and I and a couple commissioners got on a call, and he said, by Monday, figure out a plan for this. So the entire weekend, I kind of scratched my head and looked at the way we handle disasters historically, and whether it's hurricanes, whether it's floods, and we have quite a bit of experience with both of those, even fires in our state, to where we could pull some experiential knowledge and say, what's the best thing, lessons learned from all of this that we can apply now before it becomes a bigger problem. And historically what happens is you go through a disaster, you have an after-action review, and then you find out that, lo and behold, we didn't do communications very well. So instead of waiting, what I decided to do is to try to get the best people in our community that deals with communication. And I knew this was going to be a drastic, different form of communication, meaning we weren't going to be able to sit in a room and meet. So I needed technology folks that could do communication well as well. So I created a short list, and then we added to that off of some suggestions that we had in our community. But really what we wanted to do is correct a problem now. And the biggest problem, biggest concern that we had was dissemination of information. So the Joint Information Center, the COVID Joint Information Center, was started and initiated with a single purpose of sharing, gathering data from all parts of our community into one center location that could then outlet that to whoever needed it and appropriately needed it. So we would not have information just loosely going out through my social media or through Wendy's social media. It would go out through an official social media platform with official information. Because quite frankly, the dissemination of information was out of control. And we couldn't feed the media enough daily, minute by minute, when things were changing. There was nobody that could sit on their phone and feed that frenzy the way we needed to do that. So, and I'm quickly kind of going through these slides. This is the exact same presentation that I used when I got the Joint Information Task Force together in one room. I've just highlighted a few things so that you could see what we've done. But this is the original group that we put together. Everybody had a very important role, and still today, every single one of these individuals are plugging away and doing things on 6 weeks into this, where I doubt when I had them in the room on March 30th, they felt like this was going to go this long. But TJ Harris, our IT director, Kara, the AgriLife extension agent, she has a pivotal role over at the extension office at the fairgrounds. Kevin Bogus with the city. Wendy clearly has the interest of the small businesses and our community in mind. Casey Murphy with legal to make sure we don't do anything really crazy and get everybody in trouble. Damon Cunningham, which is a data GIS guy. I'm going to show you some of the work that he helps us do daily of actually what's in the Joint Information Center. And Kim Strauss, who's been just like the yeoman's work behind the scenes IT work. She pulls everything together and makes this black magic stuff work. And then Michael Oberhelman, who sits in the Joint Information Center every day between about 7 and 6 o'clock, gathering all the information that we feed him into a format that we can legibly read and interpret. And I'm going to pause every now and then, just not that I expect questions, just because if there is one, I don't want you to have to go back. And sometimes doing video-based presentations is difficult to try to remember the questions. I'm going to pause for just a minute. If there's any questions, you can ask. If not, then I'll continue. Okay, and just a verification, Wendy, just making sure my sound is okay and everything's going okay, right? Before I keep going.
Yes, your sound is great. And if someone does have a question, there's a little looks like a little comment box, and you can type a question in that chat, and we can ask it if you're not comfortable unmuting yourself and speaking. So there's various ways to ask a question.
Good point. Yeah, and if I don't see that, just interrupt me, Wendy, because I'm dual screening, but I'm not monitoring the hand raising.
No, will do.
You're not going to bother me by interrupting. So the primary purpose was really reporting the facts, the good news, the bad news, the facts, at the most real-time information that we possibly can. And that becomes problematic because unlike the hurricanes, the floods, fires, or anything else, usually the damage is done once the storm rolls through. We can give an assessment of that damage through the media, and then the dissemination is over with. But with this, it's every day at the beginning. We had 1 or 2 positives a day or some different things occurring in our businesses. And then it became hour by hour. Things were changing quickly that we could not keep up with. So when we put this together, that was really the single purpose, the overarching purpose. And this was kind of the goal of how it would improve our concerns. We wanted, the absolute best talented people in the room and leverage that to make sure we're not missing anything. And I'm sure at the after action review, we'll get together and say, you know what, we really should have done X, Y, and Z. But this is, honestly, I've never felt better about the communications of a disaster than this one. And we have learned a ton. For example, I've never presented on Teams before, and we're doing it now. So we've learned a lot about how we can communicate messages and still keep socially distant, but not have it drag the operations of a disaster down. So I really feel good about what this group has put together. There's absolutely no way, if you unplug one of these individuals, I don't think we're doing what we do today. And that's my honest feelings. I think everybody had a very important and significant role, and I'm sure we should have added somebody at some point, and we'll work to improve that on an after action. So allow better fact finding. There's a guy sitting in our JIC that gathers every piece of information that someone feeds him and makes sure it's accurate before we just report it, because that does take some time. So it's fed by businesses, officials, school officials, citizens, whoever we actually have people monitoring social media just to see when there's information out there. We can shoot that over here to the JIC, and they can start the data mining and research that to see how much is accurate. It allowed the OEM, I'm on this like third to the last bullet point, OEM to function and not chase their tails on data management. It allowed hospitals to function. It allowed the EMS agency to actually transport, treat injured COVID patients and not be chasing data. So really the primary purpose was to let the people that tactics and operations do their job and let communication specialists do what they do well. And so far, I think it's done pretty well. There's clearly some things that we can improve on, and we're doing that daily. But I'm going to get down to a little deeper into this and see. There was a certain level of trust that we had to give to the task force because the task force was getting very sensitive information, whether it was about exact locations of COVID patients or where the hotspots are and different things, because they needed that information to do their work and to help us create messaging. And I can happily say that we've had no real leaks in that system. They understand the importance of that. Casey, our assistant county attorney, has been really good about being responsive to, hey, can we do this and can we disseminate this? She is really tied to our hips, each of our hips by our phones, and we can reach out to her and make sure we're sending the appropriate messages. We also wanted to be able to create rest cycles for our elected officials. Continuity of government is really key, and the quickest way to get C-19 is for your immune system to get low, and the quickest way for that to occur is for you to be burning it on both ends. And that goes for all of us. I just got back from 2 days in Arkansas with the single purpose to get away from all of this. Left the house Friday, came back Sunday, had the phone off, and just kind of unplugged it. So we have to build in rest cycle management of elected officials and tactics and operations people. So who's feeding the Joint Information Center? And this is probably not all inclusive, but the county, the city, Brenham ISD, Blaine College, local health authority, and then our healthcare partners. And healthcare partners is a lot of people. We reach out to them daily. So literally we created a communication tool for businesses, a communication tool for nursing homes and extended care facilities, hospitals, the Regional Advisory Council for Healthcare Coalition. Each of those has a communication tool sitting up in the Joint Information Center, and each day we do a reach out and make sure they don't have any unmet needs, whether it's personal protection equipment, policies, procedures on lockdown, best practices depending on their facility, and really it creates a dialogue between that particular bubble in our community that they can do best practice sharing. Some of them do it really, really well, and then some of them you kind of have to drag them to it. So that's part of OB's responsibilities to make sure we're dragging them to that information daily. I'm going to pause again just for a quick break or question. Anything out there?
I don't see any questions.
Okay, good deal. I'll continue on. So concept of operations was really to create communication tools, and the SMEs on that group originally did a phenomenal job. I think we did this presentation on a Monday, if I remember, and by Tuesday evening, we were about 90% built, which really goes to show, and I'll call it bosses. The bosses of the individuals in the room understood the importance of giving these SMEs some time, because clearly, and I didn't think about this, I'll be honest, this is one of my after action review take-home items, is when I went down the list of creating the subject matter experts, I did not think about Kim Strauss being the busiest person on the planet because schools have shut down and everything's online and Zoom meetings, and I didn't think about it until I was at my house and my wife was doing her teacher stuff and Kim's presenting, and I'm like, wow, I didn't even think about that. So sometimes we get tunneled in our own world and we think that's the perfect person and we don't think about their normal responsibilities. But Dr. Jackson, and the list goes on with people that saw the importance of this and knew that we needed to allocate a little bit of time to make sure we pulled this off. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the dashboards and what we created, and I'm going to kind of skip down to the end of this because I want to have enough time to show you real information that's coming out of the JIC. But we created a wish list of dashboards that would track everything from personal protection equipment of nursing homes, of hospitals, of EMS agencies, of fire departments, of police officers, alternative care sites, And then we created STAR dashboards, which is an emergency management tool that says what are the needs and when did we send that up to the state, so that we can say, look, we've sent this up last week and we're in need and we're not getting it filled. And again, keep in mind, these were created before there was a problem, meaning we literally tried to get ahead of this before the influx occurred. And thankfully we did, because there was some concerns and issues that we needed to tackle. And then Wendy did a phenomenal job. And Wendy, I don't want to steal your thunder, because the way that you put together the summary of the impact to our local community businesses was phenomenal. And there's no way we could have pulled that off without you actually being kind of the center point on pulling those businesses together and say, what is your impact? The data that's coming out of that is just phenomenal. And I'll give you an opportunity to share some of that, because I don't really have a dashboard on that. It's such an overwhelming amount of information. It's hard to create it in a concise dashboard, but I'd like to give you an opportunity to at least talk about that towards the end. So these are just communication tools and group me's that we built throughout the region. And all this allows is just communication between their little bubbles of stuff. So I'm going to stop that sharing and go to, I think I've got it up here. So what I'm about to show you is some dashboards within the Joint Information Center. And these are pictures, so they're not live because I'd have to live stream it, but you can see bottom right corner. Let me make sure though, is my screen sharing, Wendy?
No, we're still stuck on the needs slide, so we don't see your dashboards.
I'm glad I asked, so let me fix that. 1 second.
You may have to stop and then
Yeah, give me 1 second here. Pull that up. Open this big. Stop sharing. And now start sharing. What about now?
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. Does it change screens when are you seeing a pie chart now? Perfect.
Yes, it's a pie chart.
Okay, that should work. So what you're seeing here is it was updated 4 minutes ago. You can see in the bottom right corners of these screens, and then he physically took a screenshot and just sent them to me so that it would be easier to kind of show you what we're doing. But these screens are 20-inch screens inside our Joint Information Center, always displayed real-time information. Every time something changes, you see a tick mark change. And when that occurs, I get a text message letting me know what has changed inside the Joint Information Center. So it's pretty, it's technology wizard stuff, and I don't know how they make it work, but it's pretty phenomenal about how they're pulling it together. So you can see we've got 150 cases reported. 28 recovered, 101 active cases. So that's just doing simple math of how many has deceased, how many has recovered. And then we do the math on that. So active cases in our county is 101. And then this shows the total test, 881 total tests throughout our community. And that's the only number that's probably a best close guesstimate, because it's really difficult to get that information from the labs about how many tests they've ran and how many labs are out there. So that number is plus or minus a few. The next slide just shows us by age. So, and all of this information is stuff that Casey's approved us to present on. But you can see we've had a little bit of everything, but the majority of our cases are above 60 years old. That represents almost 70% of our cases in the county. The next one is male, female. So about 70% of the cases are female, 32% are male cases. And then by status, which is where they currently are, and this changes depending if they are admitted to a hospital and then released. We change that on the fly. So you can see currently only 3% of the total cases that are active are in a hospital. You can see the red number of 14% and then the recovered of 18%. So over time, the green number should grow as people recover from the virus. The next one is deaths over time, and this is probably this is our, the slide that's most upsetting to us when you look at this. I've got two things in the picture. If you watched the total deaths, which is the yellow highlight going up pretty steep. It looks like it's kind of starting to flatten out over the last day or two, but it's got a pretty steep incline. That's what our total deaths per over a given time since we've started. If you removed the one facility in our community, you would see the blue line only, which is reflective of the community spread in our community and not the confinement spread of one facility. So it's pretty important that we demonstrate that and show what that is. There's a lot of things we can learn from this yellow line. I don't think this is the last time we see a virus of this type, whether it's corona, whether it's H1N1. I think there's a lot of things we can learn from this. We just need to make sure we're learning those hard lessons. There should be one other slide. I'm going to go backwards. Okay, so this is cases over time, total number of cases over time. Again, blue line representative just in the community. Yellow line is representative of the facility plus the community spread. Good news, and we were on a conference call with Senator Colhorst and State Rep Lamont last week, Thursday, and we told them to predict a couple things. We told them, one, predict that the facility in our community that has these positive cases will have a rapid incline of deaths over the next 8 to 10 days. We also told them to expect a steady or a leveling out of the positive cases in that community, which is exactly what we're seeing over the last 6 or 7 days. And so the cases have leveled off, but all of these dots representing cases throughout time now either have to get better or they're going to get really sick. So again, I hate talking about people using dots and numbers because that doesn't reflect our true emotions very well. These are real people that across the hallway from me, about 30 feet, I have a group of paramedics that are transporting these dots daily. And that's real to them. And that's real to the family members. That's real to the nursing home that's managing them. That is a real crisis that we have in our community. But, I will say but there, it is part of our job to make sure, if you remember the third slide, to get the good news, the bad news, and the facts out to our community. And the elected officials that can make decisions on how we manage these facilities have to have real information and accurate information. And sometimes giving them projections is great news. This slide is good news at the end of the day, is leveling off. And one thing's for sure, when you have a containment of a virus in one facility, over 21 days, the virus will dissipate. It won't live inside a human very long. So long enough to do damage, clearly, but we know over time this will start to go down because, quite frankly, 80% of that facility has it. So it can't go much higher. And I don't want to get too deep into that. Wendy cut me off at any time on that. But what I wanted to do, the primary purpose was to show you information that's coming out of the Joint Information Center, show you how it's getting into the Joint Information Center, and really explain to you why we created it. And I hope I've done that. I've talked for about 20 minutes, so I'm going to turn it back to Wendy or whoever wants to drive from here. I'm going to try to stop sharing, and then you can bring up your slide again if you want, and I'll just be around to answer questions, comments, rumors, whatever I can do to help.
Perfect. Does anyone have questions for Kevin? Well, Kevin, I'll touch on just really quickly the economic impact data that you had mentioned. And so one of the things that we are doing is every week our economic development professionals are meeting virtually, of course. That includes from the city, from the county, from the Economic Development Foundation, from the Economic Development Services Department within the city, and also our SBDC, our Small Business Development Center that's housed at Blinn. So we meet weekly. Of course, Shay joins us from the chamber and our chamber board, Jay Schrader. And we just talk about how can we help navigate this path for not just chamber members, but for all businesses in Washington County that are impacted by this. Specifically for our chamber members, what we are seeing is about 15% of our membership is actually has an increase in their revenues and growth, they are adding production, and those businesses are predominantly in the food services. So they're somehow responsible in the food chain to get your food from, point A to your table. So whether it be our grocery stores, our food packaging, food manufacturing, food transport, food distribution, so they're actually seeing an increase in the demand for their services. Then we have about 35% of our membership that is actually kind of holding steady. They're not seeing significant growth or significant downturn. But as this pandemic continues to progress, we are still seeing kind of a just let's sit and wait and see attitude. So there's not a lot of additional investment going into construction, our business to business services, insurances, things like that. So that's about 35% of our businesses that we're seeing. They're just kind of in a holding pattern, if you will. No new growth, no planning, no forecasting for the future. But then we've got about 50% of our member businesses that have seen significant reductions in their income and their revenues. So those are our real estate offices, our hospitality partners, our retail partners, those industries that, tourism is a key part of our economy, and it has definitely been hit hard during our peak season. So we're seeing about 50% of our membership with lower occupancy rates in their bed and breakfast and their hotels. And then, of course, our restaurants, our cosmetic and personal services industry. So they've definitely been hit the hardest, and that does represent about 50% of our membership at the Chamber, which translates pretty equally to the business community at large in Washington County. So definitely there is an impact, and you'll see us working together as agencies coming together, just like we did in the JIC, to get information out about the health and safety of the community. You'll see that the Chamber, the city, the county, the Economic Development Foundation, Economic Development Services, we're all committed to collaborating to get information and resources out to the public. And of course, we're at the Chamber, trying to bring webinars just like this to get information to you, our membership, and to our community, so we can make sure that we're still adding value to our members and being attentive to what they need. So that's really all I have. And like I said, we're open for questions, both Kevin and myself. If anyone has questions, you can just type them in the comments, or you can ask them. I'll pause for a minute to.
Yeah, that's great information, Wendy. And thanks for inviting me to speak on this. If you need anything else, or if you need me to come back and present any information as hopefully this winds down and doesn't wind more up, but if you need updates from the Joint Information Center, or if any of your businesses in town need direct information, we can get that call number to them as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Kevin, and thank you for your time today. And I don't think we have any questions, so I think we'll end our call. So thank you, everyone, for your time. We tried to make efficient use of this 30 minutes, so we appreciate your time. And thank you again, Kevin, for your time today, but more importantly, thank you for your leadership in our community. Like I said in the beginning of this, I would not want to be in any other place. You've done an outstanding job preparing for this pandemic and handling it, so thank you.
Thanks, Wendy.
All right, take care, everyone. We're going to end the call.
It's Kevin.
Is now